My technical experience starts a very long time ago. I used to work on AS400 and System 36s with my dad back in the very, very old days. And I can remember 8086s and 8087s and doing very basic commands in order to be able to play very basic games when I was a very young child. And that's a very big difference between me and most candidates my age. Because I really started with computers at age 5 and am now 32, I have 27 years of computer experience, and most people who are 32 don't. I did my first Microsoft migration from Novell at 14, working with taking companies that were running NetWare and moving them to Windows for Work groups with Novell integration was something that I spent my summers doing at 14. That's not a typical 14-year-old's job. And when I was 16, I worked with a company called North Star BHP Steel, and literally what I would do was they were building a steel mill, and I would take the trailers that they had set up and set up all of the computers. Then, as they were building the steel mill, they would set up a new set of trailers. I'd move all of the equipment into those trailers, and they would tear down the old trailers, and then they'd move them, and we'd just leapfrog from place to place. So I rebuilt their network something like 8 times over the course of a summer. And in doing so, I had to do all of the network configuration, all of the router configuration. I had to do punch downs for Cat5 runs. And this experience gave me that complete understanding of an entire network and securities and permissions and ACLs and group policy objects and things that a normal 16-year-old wasn't doing at the time. As I was leaving high school, I had a number of opportunities that I probably should have taken and didn't. But even going into college, my IT background surpassed most of the people that I would have been taking classes from at the college and university level. And so I took a break from doing technology, and that was how I fell into the camping stuff, was that I wanted to do something that wasn't technology oriented so that I could have a break and make sure that I wanted to do technology things going forward. As Y2K hit, I looked at the easy money that was coming for doing Y2K compliance and built scripts and ghost images and other technologies for doing Y2K upgrades in mass so that I could literally charge $200 per station, and that was cheap compared to everybody else to do all of the Y2K compliance patches that they needed. And I could do in the neighborhood of 50 computers in 2 hours. And so I would pull up in the morning on a weekend and do 50 computers by lunch, do another 50 computers by the end of the day, and have made a crap load of money. And that was good work. After that, I got really into the video space. A bunch of my clients had been colleges, and the nature of things was just such that distance learning was catching on. And as I got into the video space, it worked out that the internet was pretty new. Pushing IPTV was something that nobody had really thought to do. And I started to build technologies for improving the compression algorithms and reducing the noise in the signals so that you could push video at lower bandwidths. This led me to develop a 3D technology very early on. As a result of a type of artifact that I was working with, I started to notice that you could get this pseudo 3D effect. And in doing research, I was able to build a psychovisual model that allowed you to actually take 2D content and present it to a person in a way that would let their brain do a lot of the conversion to 3D. without having to do all the necessary math to actually find all of the placements and build a 3D map for the image. As I started to develop these compression and video technologies, IPTV started to catch on, and I landed a client with Akimbo and started building a very large encoding facility for them. And at the time, I had built the largest video ingest facility on the planet, which wasn't as huge of a thing as it might sound like, because it was about 12 computers and we ran it 24 hours a day in order to reach those numbers. But it really was the first time that any company had said, we're going to take digital masters or analog masters and digitize them in order to make them ready for IPTV. And so I was very proud to be part of Akimbo very early on. As it became apparent that Akimbo was not going to be successful, I moved on to working with Microsoft IPTV. They were about 2 years behind Akimbo, but being Microsoft, they didn't have to succeed with their first go-around. They could release a product that was proof of concept, get that early step into the market, and then grow it over the number of years. Working with Microsoft on this early stage of IPTV was a lot of fun. Working with the large budgets that you needed for test, because tape decks run in the neighborhood of $55,000 for an HD tape deck. And getting the encoders, each H.264 encoder that we bought was in the neighborhood of $50,000, and we had them from each of the 6 manufacturers that had one. And we had more than one of each of them for doing A/B testing. So you got to spend the necessary amount of money in order to build out these test facilities. And Microsoft had a fully working cable plant. The head end that would normally be at Comcast, they had on their campus. And so I got access to all of that, which was also a great opportunity to learn, very deep information about the IP protocols that were going on. We were talking with Cisco directly in order to fix issues that were the result of encoders not being able to pass packets to the end user, and all sorts of very deep integration. I was talking directly to the manufacturers and filing bugs against their products in order to get them to resolve it. So it wasn't just working with Microsoft, it was working with Sigma and Cisco and all of these encoder manufacturers in order to get products working the way they were supposed to in an end-to-end solution. I don't think many people ever get that kind of opportunity to really touch millions of dollars of hardware, millions of dollars of software, and when something breaks, actually talk to the guys at this other Fortune 50, Fortune 500 company and say, hey, this is your bug. How are we going to fix it? And wandering over to their offices and say, okay, what can I do to build a test scenario to help you replicate this bug in your lab? And to me, that was super exciting. And I wouldn't have traded that job for any job on the planet. Now, of course, because it was pre-deployment, it didn't go on like that forever. The job changed over time. And so I did eventually leave Microsoft for other opportunities to do similar things with evolving products. And hopefully, since I've rambled on for a very long time now and I'm aware of it, that will give you a good background of my philosophies on technology, how I got here, and what really excites me. And if you have specific technology questions, that's where a face-to-face interview really comes into play.